The most dopamine that I got while watching the new Superman is when I got jump scared by Bradley Cooper at the beginning of the movie. And I'm not saying this because I love to suck the fun out of everything and criticize popular things, but I didn't really enjoy the new Superman. I just don't really care for it. At worst, it is a hollow, tonally confused, boring, and lazy superhero movie, and at best, it just feels like being thrown into an episode of an admittedly decent Superman TV show. So let me tell you why I believe that the new Superman is, to be frank, overrated. One of the biggest issues that I have with this movie is that it takes itself too seriously to be as silly as it is. When you're trying to be profound and mature, as this movie attempts to be most of the time, you can't expect me to let you get away with things like Lex Luthor being smart enough to create pocket universes, but not smart enough to come up with a more effective way of fighting Superman than shouting commands to his team, who then have to input those commands, which then have to be interpreted by the person actually fighting Superman. I'm sorry, but this is not even a nitpick. The only reason that this whole command shouting thing works is because of plot, and Superman is just not this slow and weak, but they make him look like a joke in battle. This is just bad writing, and it makes the fight scenes super lame. Lex Luthor shouting 1A, 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 1A is not cool. It is not aura. It just looks really silly. And there's nothing wrong with silly, but you have to embrace the silly, and this movie does not do that. Like I said, it takes itself pretty seriously, which is why this does not work. And yes, this is a legitimate critique I have about this movie. It genuinely ruins my immersion. But that is obviously not enough to warrant what I said about this movie in the beginning, so let me talk about something else, which is the characters. Sometimes they are solid and genuinely really well performed. The argument scene in the beginning of the movie is probably the best part of the entire film, but the majority of the time they are overacting and they are too underdeveloped for me to care about them or anything pertaining to them. It is not the actors' fault, and the cast is actually pretty stacked and had a lot of potential, but this movie does them dirty. It's like we're expected to be super familiar with these characters that we haven't even met yet, which is why I said in the beginning that it feels like we're being thrown into the middle of a Superman TV show. But back to the overacting thing, it just feels forced sometimes, like I'm watching a high school play instead of a multi-million-dollar film, and I think that's mostly because there's no character development. Sure, there is characterization, but one of the biggest problems this movie has is treating the audience like they already know and love these renditions of these famous characters when this is really the first time we're seeing them, ever. There is no development, therefore no connection that I have with the characters, therefore no interest I have in what happens to them or what goes on in the story, which brings me to my next point, the story. Where to begin? The plot of this movie is one of, if not the biggest reason as to why I think this movie doesn't really feel whole. Giving us some expository text and then throwing us into a super boring opening sequence is not how you start a story. But the actual plot itself is very basic, very uninteresting, and all over the place. We're given no time to be immersed in a single moment as the movie bounces from Antarctica to Metropolis to the Daily Planet to Lois's apartment to the Pentagon to the Planet Watch camp to a pocket universe to Bravia. I was never invested in the plot or in these characters because I was never given the time to be. I think everything just moves too fast, and this movie felt more like a compilation to me instead of an actual movie with story beats and an overarching plot and legitimate consequences. Next, I want to talk about the tone or the tones of this movie because, like the story, it is all over the place, and James Gunn is usually really good at balancing vastly different tones like he did with the Guardians movies, but in Superman he seems to be off his game. There are some tonally satisfying and tonally consistent scenes like the argument scene, but most of the time it is just all over the place and I have no idea what to feel while watching a certain scene or just while watching the whole movie. I'll think that a serious scene is starting, but then somebody tries to make a joke that does not land, or a character who has barely had any screen time and who I know nothing about and who I don't really care for much at all will try to have a profound emotional impact on me right between all the other crap happening in the story. And yes, I am specifically talking about the scene with Pa Kent. This did not hit for me. Nothing else in the movie hit for me, but right now I'm talking about this scene specifically. But anyway, to wrap up this section, this movie is very tonally confused and it never lets me feel, well, anything. The only exception to this is the argument scene, which I actually did like, but that is it. Now let me talk about Superman himself, who feels like a side character in his own movie. I don't care if he has the most screen time, he still feels overshadowed by other prominent characters who the movie focuses on just as much as him. Lex Luthor is the biggest example of this, and I think that even as the main villain, we still get too much of him. But some more characters who take up time that should have been used for Superman are the Justice Gang, Lois, Jimmy, and Eve. Now don't get me wrong, I am all for having plenty of good side characters, but first of all, these side characters aren't that good, and second of all, this movie is called Superman, not Superman versus Lex Luthor, and also the Justice Gang is there and some other characters who are also important. Also, side note, is Jimmy really that good looking? Like, I'm not calling him ugly, but do women really find him this attractive? I'm not a girl, so I don't really know, and I'm also not gay, so I don't really know, but the girls in this movie act like he's Chris Hemsworth or something. I know I just said I wasn't gay, but actually, for Chris Hemsworth. Anyway, maybe Jimmy is just canonically super handsome, which is a good enough explanation for me. This is not an actual critique, it's just something I wanted to include for some reason. Now let me say something positive about this movie. movie. I actually really like the direction and the camera work. It is very unique and exciting in classic James Gunn fashion, but I feel it necessary to mention the director of photography, Henry Braham, who has worked with Gunn on pretty much all of his recent movies. Director of photography is easily one of the most important roles a person can have in a film, but they do not get enough credit and recognition for what they do. So Henry, I know you will probably never ever see this, but I think you're pretty great. I genuinely don't like this movie, but you specifically did a really good job. Now with the praise out of the way, let me say something that will make fans of this movie even angrier. I enjoyed Man of Steel more than this movie. I'm not saying Man of Steel is inherently a better movie, but I think Henry Cavill's Superman is more entertaining, even if he's a worse or less accurate Superman, and I think that all of the side characters in Man of Steel were executed better than the side characters in this Superman. Maybe this Superman will grow on me, maybe it'll age really well, but I have my doubts. In conclusion, James Gunn's new Superman is a mess of a movie that tries too hard to be funny, to be profound, to be mature, and just to be good. I hate to say it, but this movie, it insists upon itself. Sorry, James. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching, and please let me know what you'd like to see next. If you enjoyed, please consider dropping a like and a sub. It would mean so much to me, and until next time.